Hello everybody and welcome to this week's video cast for subscribers to david.com. It's been a momentous, special week in my life with the release of the movie Renegade about my life and work, and it's been incredibly encouraging what's happened. The film went to #1 on the first day in the UK documentary chart on iTunes. It got into the top 15 immediately in the United States. It's the first in other places around the world. Last time I looked, the Czech Republic and others. #3 in Australia. And it's been very, very encouraging. In fact, in Britain, it's got into the top 30 of all movies, including Hollywood feature movies and movies like Bohemian Rhapsody. So it's very, very encouraging what's happened. And because the film is not only for people who've been into my work before, but also to present the information across a great range of subjects in a way that people who know nothing about what I'm writing about, what I'm talking about, can see very easily, immediately, how it all fits together. It's has great potential for increasing the number of people around the world who have access to information that looks at the world, shall we say, from another angle. Not just politically and in terms of world events, but also in the nature of reality. That's all in there as well. And it's very, very encouraging to hear from people who have been to the premieres of the film and have taken people along, maybe friends or family who are not into my information at all, didn't know much about it, and for them to say what a tremendous effect it had on those people who saw the world from a different angle, and it made sense to them. So that's all good. And so we do need to find more and more ways of communicating this information, because the censorship of those that challenge the official narrative must be seen in the context of what is happening, which is that it's systematic, and it's a war on any view or information, any facts that challenge the official narrative of everything. And ironically, I've pointed this out so many times because it is blatantly obvious if you take the time to look at it, it's those who call themselves progressive who are actually the stormtroopers who are driving on behalf of multi-billionaire corporations this censorship of anyone they've been programmed to believe should not have a right to free speech like they do. So this week, another great number of people challenging the official narrative, many times in ways I don't agree with, but that doesn't matter. This is what this progressive mob cannot grasp, is freedom of speech is not about what you agree with, it's about the right to have your opinion. And so there are many people who are being demonetized and banned in this new purge by YouTube, owned by Google and its parent company Alphabet, that I don't agree with, who say things I don't agree with. But I'm not calling for them to be banned. Even the extremes of the progressive mob that I seriously don't agree with, and which are, I would suggest, advancing an agenda without the understanding that's what they're doing most of the time, of a deeply malevolent, multi-billionaire elite. But I don't want them banned either. I have the confidence that information will given to people in totality will be powerful in and of itself without needing to ban people who don't agree with it. So I have the confidence to do that. I have the confidence to say, look, put what I'm saying in and circulate it with what everyone else is saying, and I'm confident that what I'm saying has the validity for it to be seen to have validity by people that actually look at it rather than just hear one-liners. Whereas the progressive mob, playing the game of the multi-billionaire elite, don't have that confidence. Self-identity warriors who self-identify with labels, which I don't, do not have the confidence that what they're saying and trying to get people to believe will be seen to have validity when challenged by other opinions. So what they want is other opinions to disappear, so only what they say to be heard by anybody, thus forming the perceptions of the population by default. And it is kind of ironic. Well, it's more than ironic. It's just monumentally ironic that what we're now seeing is the mainstream media, who cheer when the alternative media is censored and banned, now being targeted. And I've said from the start that the mainstream media may cheer the targeting of the alternative media, but it will be them eventually, and now it's starting to happen. In the same way, the progressive mob is being used to justify and to demand the censorship of people it don't agree with, but the progressive mob will be subject to that same censorship eventually when it steps out of line. And this week, we've had this story. Australian feds raid broadcaster's office over Afghan war crime stories. Australian police have raided national broadcaster ABC's headquarters over a 2017 story series exposing crimes committed by special forces in Afghanistan, the second raid on journalists in 2 days. 6 officers, including 3 police technicians, descended on the broadcaster's Sydney offices with a warrant explaining the raid was, quote, in retaliation to allegations of publishing classified material contrary to provisions of the Crimes Act 1914. The classified material in question was hundreds of pages of leaked defence documents marked Austeo, Australian eyes only, that formed the basis of ABC's 2017 story series, The Afghan Files. The warrant names the report's authors, Dan Oakes and Sam Clark, as well as ABC News director Gavin Morris. The officers rounded up ABC's IT staff to assist in examining their email server, looking for a series of keywords, while others scoured the hard drive. Yes, this is Australia in 2019. Australia, a country I've been saying for a long time, is a tyranny masquerading as a free society. Now we're beginning to see. You see, while the mainstream media adheres to the official narrative and doesn't expose it, then it's fine. Oh, there's no censorship of the alternative of the mainstream media. They just publish what they want. And then you cross that line, like ABC did here, exposing potential war crimes, I say war crimes, in Afghanistan by Australian troops. And suddenly it's not fine anymore, and in go the feds. So the officers rounded up these ABC IT staff people and scoured the hard drive. According to John Lyons, the ABC executive editor and head of investigations department, who live tweeted the raid, officers helpfully told him they were interested in very specific matters and, quote, certain things, dryly noting this could take some time. Lyons reported 4 hours into the raid, they had collected over 9,200 files and were deciding which could be seized under the warrant. It is highly unusual for the national broadcast to be raided in this way, ABC Managing Director David Anderson told News.com Australia, promising to support its journalists, protect its sources, and continue to report without fear or favour on national security and intelligence issues when there is a clear public interest. Now, like going back to what I've just said, it is highly unusual for the national broadcast to be raided in this way. Why? Because it's highly unusual for the national broadcaster to cross the line into seriously challenging the narrative and exposing the truth. It's cause and effect. The federal police released a statement after the raid on Wednesday, claiming no arrests are planned today as a result of this activity, and denying it was connected to an intimidating visit paid to another journalist in Canberra the previous day, though it's hard not to see a connection, given both were publishing stories on government misconduct based on documents unavailable to the public. Officers raided News Corps journalist I-cke Smethurst's home on Tuesday, triggered by a story she wrote last year revealing the government's plans to dramatically expand the Australian Signals Directorate spying on its own citizens, giving the agency power to secretly access bank records, text messages, and emails without an individual's knowledge. Officers reportedly spent 7 hours picking through Smethurst's possessions. An unauthorized leak of national security information was cited as the cause. That same day, 2GB radio host Ben Fordham said he had been contacted by the Department of Home Affairs in an effort to find out how he'd obtained highly confidential information for his reporting on asylum seeker vessels. Condemning the disturbing pattern of assaults on Australian press freedom, the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, Australia's journalists union, called the raids nothing short of an attack on the public's right to know. The Afghan Files describes a number of incidents in which Australian special forces shot civilians in addition to the insurgents they were supposed to be fighting, and reveal Afghan authorities were becoming increasingly agitated over Australians allegedly killing unarmed civilians to the point that they threatened to stop working with Australians. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has refused to condemn the raids, declaring all Australians must abide by national security laws. He won a miracle re-election last month, giving his Liberal National Party a third straight term in power. Morrison appears to be using his mandate to crack down on antagonistic journalism. Well, what happened here is absolutely appalling, but equally absolutely predictable by anyone with half a brain cell on active duty. However, given Australian journalism, from my own direct experience, overwhelmingly lacks that basic intelligence, it couldn't see it coming. And this is the same media that sat on its hands, zipped its mouth, or openly applauded my ban from Australia 4 hours before my plane left for a multi-city speaking tour. There was no outrage from the media. There was outrage from the public. There was no outrage from the media. And now they're beginning to see, only because it's put in their face, that it's me first, and then it's increasingly them. It's absolutely pathetic what we're seeing. The Australian mainstream media is, with honourable exceptions, an absolute disgrace to the word journalism. And once you go down that road, eventually you become subject to that which you cheer or stay silent about. So this is something that we're going to see more of. And given the absence of a pair by most journalists, again with honourable exceptions, what most of them will now do is start to pull back and self-censor even the limits they've been in so far, and they've been bad enough, so that this doesn't happen to them. This is all connected globally to what's happening to Assange. As an example to everyone else, this is what happens if you tell the public what we don't want them to know. Same with this ABC raid. They're saying this is what happens when you tell people what we don't want them to know. And a lot of journalists, or what pass for them, are going to be saying, oh, well, we better not tell people what they want to know, or we might get raided, or might get like Assange. Yeah, but that's your job. And if you're not willing to do that, then don't call yourself a journalist. Call yourself a repeater of the official narrative, because that's all most journalists are, or what pass for journalists. I keep saying that because it's a disgrace to the word journalism in its true sense. And this week in Britain, we've had the UK Foreign Secretary, a bloke called Jeremy Hunt, and the guy who wants to be the next Prime Minister of Britain. God help us, mind you, God help us with all of them that are standing. And this is an article on davidicke.com this week by Kathleen Johnson, who does some great stuff. And she writes, British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt has just given a speech extolling the virtues of a free media. Because, like I say, the media must be free, according to these system servers, to tell the public what the system wants them to believe. But of course it mustn't be free to tell them otherwise. So when they talk about we must protect press freedom, what it means is we must protect the freedom of the press to tell people what we want them to believe. So British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt has just given a speech extolling the virtues of a free media, praising the journalists who've been brave enough to expose the truth about wicked governments in the face of tyrannical oppression, brackets, except Julian Assange, as she goes on to point out. While he was preparing to give his speech without any indication of any self-reflection at all, these people have no self-awareness, let alone reflection, he defended the torture of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. After news broke that UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, had found that Julian Assange had been the victim of psychological torture for years, Hunt, who is gunning to become the UK's next Prime Minister, accused him of interfering in British affairs and making inflammatory statements. But intervening in the affairs of other countries by bombing the innocent, that's okay. This is wrong. Hunt tweeted, Assange chose to hide in the embassy and was always free to leave and face justice. The UN Special Rapporteur should allow British courts to make their judgments without his interference or inflammatory accusations. With all due respect, Mr. Assange was about as free to leave as someone sitting on a rubber boat in a shark pool, Melzer replied. As detailed in my formal letter to you so far, UK courts have not shown the impartiality and objectivity required by the rule of law. Now, of course, Jeremy Hunt was speaking, and therefore what he said was disingenuous. This is another cause and effect. The reason Assange, and I've no brief for Assange as a person, I don't know him, it's the principle that I'm talking about, the principle of freedom. And the reason Assange went to the Ecuadorian embassy to avoid so-called British justice, and it is so-called, was because of his concern that if he was arrested for an alleged crime out of Sweden, etc., then he would, once in custody, be subject to an extradition order to be extradited to the United States, where they would throw every book they possibly could at him in a show trial to say, this is what happens if you take us on. And of course, since he was taken from the embassy by force on this say-so of the disgusting new Ecuadorian leader who replaced the man who allowed asylum for Assange, then everything Assange and his lawyers were concerned about has happened. And suddenly a Swedish case against him that had been dropped is suddenly resurrected. So now there is an extradition request to the United States by Assange, on Assange. And also through this case in Sweden, there's an alternative way of getting him to the United States if necessary. And this whole idea of facing British justice, when Assange was manhandled out of the embassy by British police, who were allowed to go into what is Ecuadorian sovereign land, according to diplomatic protocol, by this Lenin guy, well named, current leader in Ecuador, he went before a judge who should be, throughout the legal process, completely impartial. And all he had to do, this judge, was to rubber stamp the holding in custody of Assange. Instead, he launches into a personal character assassination on Assange from his bench. And we're supposed to believe, with that start alone, that Assange is going to have justice handed out to him. It is outrageous. And what's happening as this totalitarian state, globally and in its various national forms, gets more and more blatant because it's becoming more and more part of life as they transform society. As this continues, we're going to see more and more of these things. And here's Jeremy Hunt again. Jeremy Hunt says he would not block WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange from being extradited to the US if he became Prime Minister. Well, God forbid on many levels that Jeremy Hunt becomes Prime Minister, but what he's articulating there is government policy. The plan all along has been to get Assange out of the Ecuadorian embassy, brackets achieved, and then extradite him to the United States for publishing material that no one has denied is factually true and that exposed blatant war crimes and cold-blooded murder by American troops in places like Afghanistan. The Foreign Secretary has said a government he led would not block Julian Assange's extradition to the USA, while the WikiLeaks founder faces the prospect of dying in jail if found guilty of espionage. That's what they want. And Assange has been attacked, condemned, and his fate cheered by the mainstream media overwhelmingly for doing the job they should have been doing. And these latest charges against Assange by the American Gestapo have suddenly alerted some in the mainstream media to the implications for them of someone being charged in the way that they are now charging Assange, in the sense that they are charging him with essentially publishing so-called classified information that happens to be true. And for classified read what we don't want people to know about. And they're now realizing that actually when we rarely publish things that the government doesn't like, well, these charges mean that we could be charged with the same thing. Oh, it might affect me. It's outrageous. But Assange? Oh, well, no, don't bother about him. Here's another story, again by Kathleen Johnson. She writes some really great stuff on davidicke.com. BBC Sky News have hidden their interviews with UN expert on the torture of Assange. UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, has said that on the 31st of May he gave video interviews with both Sky News and the BBC on his findings that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is the victim of psychological torture. As of this writing, footage of those interviews is nowhere to be found. In response to a smear by virulent empire propagandist Idris Ahmed about his conducting an interview with RT, Melzer tweeted that he has given interviews to both Sky News and BBC World, but that they seem not to have been aired. So the UN rapporteur actually appeared on the Kremlin's premier propaganda network. Yes, the propaganda network of the state that shoots journalists in the face to discuss Julian Assange's torture, tweeted Ahmad, pretending to be under the illusion that UN experts are meant to remain exclusively loyal to a specific group of nations. For the record, on May the 1st, I've also given similar exclusive TV interviews to both Sky News and BBC World on Julian Assange, but it seems they decided not to broadcast them, Melzer responded. Indeed, there is, as of this writing, no video footage to be found anywhere of Melzer's interviews with either of these outlets. If you search for online video footage of Nils Melzer conducting interviews on the subject, you'll find videos from RT and Rupli, which is a Russian RT-connected news agency and news footage agency. You'll find his excellent interview on Democracy Now! but you won't find videos from BBC World or Sky News, nor any record of any video interviews ever being heard. So it appears, she writes, that these interviews were never aired at all, or if they were aired, have had any record of them hidden from easy online visibility. In any case, this is a big deal. The BBC published one print article that contains a few small excerpts from a discussion with Melzer, but in terms of impact and quantity of information, this comes nowhere close to a televised interview and online video footage. So, this is what the censorship online by your YouTubes and your Facebooks and your Twitters and your Apples and your other like organizations is defending. This is what it calls legitimate news sources, while it calls that which tells the truth fake news. Could it be more blatant? No, it couldn't. And if you're looking for an absolutely appalling personification of what I'm talking about, look no further than Rachel Maddow. She's not a journalist. She's a propagandist. She works for an American TV network called MSNBC. She has been one of the prime liars who have been putting out the Russian manipulation story on the basis of no supportable evidence, and was embarrassed when the Mueller report into this alleged collusion could come up with no evidence that would lead to prosecution according to the remit that he was following. And I wouldn't trust Mueller to tell me the time in a room full of clocks either, for reasons I explain in a book I've just finished. So this is the headline: Maddow inconsolable after YouTube recommends RT interview on Mueller report. I mean, I find it now impossible to watch Rachel Maddow. It's like someone scratching a nail across glass or something, or metal. It's cringe-worthy to see someone who masquerades as a journalist to lie and distort and demand censorship of others is truly sickening to observe. So this is the story anyway. Russiagate guru Rachel Maddow has caught wind of the latest Kremlin-linked outrage. YouTube recommended an RT video about the Mueller report, and now social media users have lined up to laugh at her. The MSNBC host ascended her Twitter pulpit, because that's what she believes she is. She's actually part of a religious movement where facts don't matter, like all religious movements, really, if you break most of them down. To share a shocking Washington Post article detailing how YouTube allegedly recommended an RT video hundreds of thousands of times to users seeking information about the recently released report by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The video in question, an episode of On Contact, which is hosted by Pulitzer Prize-winning American journalist Chris Hedges, features an interview with Canadian journalist Aaron Mate. A fierce critic of the Trump-Russia collusion theory promoted by the mainstream media, Mate recently received an Izzy Award for his contrarian reporting on Russiagate, while Maddow was apparently horrified by the thought of impressionable Americans watching a video of two acclaimed journalists discussing current events. Others were more perturbed by the MSNBC host's melodramatic tweeting. Chris Hedges won a Pulitzer Prize. Aaron Mate won an Izzy. This YouTube is much better than the warmongering conspiracy lunacy that comes from you. This tweeter, Patricia Dowling, said to Maddow in reply, you should be ashamed to smear good people and good content in such a base and McCarthyite way. And that's exactly what Maddow does. She is the poster girl, poster woman of the progressive mob, who, whether that's changed because memories are short, I don't know. But after the Mueller report, which came up with nothing to support what she'd been telling people to believe for 2 years previously, her audience dramatically fell. But, you know, the power of telling people what they want to hear, it'll probably climb again. Rachel Maddow, absolutely the very opposite of what a proper journalist acts like. Extraordinary. Now, I came as, just a short ferry ride from Trump and the Queen this week, because I live on the Isle of Wight, just off the south coast of England, and the ferry port that the ferry goes into from here, takes about 25 minutes or so, is Portsmouth. And at Portsmouth, actually Southsea, which is a part of the Portsmouth urban conurbation, Trump and the Queen arrived this week to mark the anniversary of the D-Day landings. And it's, of course, the media has been full of it all week. And it's all been in the mainstream media, so I won't go into all that. But this is something I will highlight. Trump breaks royal protocol, touches Queen at state dinner. There are certain royal protocol rules to follow when in the presence of the Queen, and Donald Trump just made a major etiquette faux pas. During the state banquet dinner at Buckingham Palace, it appears that President Trump touched the Queen on the back. Outrageous. As she stood for his toast. Were they having breakfast? What's going on? Oh, drink. Okay. What would you rise for your toast? You'd sit down and butter it, wouldn't you? Anyway, what rule did Donald Trump break? I can't wait to hear. Let me share it with you. President Donald Trump was spotted lightly touching Queen Elizabeth II on the back during the dinner, a violation of royal protocol, which dictates that you can't touch the Queen unless she first offers her hand to you. And quite right. The faux pas was made after Trump had delivered a speech. However, the Queen appeared unfazed by the situation. Oh, she's an amazing woman. Such fortitude that she was unfazed by someone lightly touching her back. He addressed the attendees, noting from the Second World War to today, Her Majesty has stood as a constant symbol of these priceless traditions. She has embodied the spirit of dignity, duty, and patriotism that beats proudly in every British heart. Oh, God. So I'm no supporter of Trump, you may have noticed, nor of Hillary Clinton, nor of any of these this rabble that try to become leaders of America and try to become leaders of Britain and all the rest of it. But it just highlights the elitist insanity of royalty, that somehow you become a head of state on the basis of who had sex with who in what order, because that's how the line of succession comes about, and that nobody else can become official head of state except the same interprocreating bloodline. And that once you are part of this bloodline and you become its head, then there is royal protocol. Because they're not just human beings, you see, like you and me. No, they're special. And therefore you can't touch them in any form unless they put their hand out. The Queen, anyway. And you can't turn your back on the Queen when you're leaving the room. You have to walk backwards. And there's a list of these other nonsenses. And every now and again, when somebody new comes into the royal family hierarchy, genetic hierarchy, basically, then you see the Queen issue a new royal protocol of which royals have to bow or curtsy to which royals on the basis of who's higher than them in the hierarchy. Yes, I know it's insanity, but they're heads of state. They're basically the ruling family of the country. You know, the British government is not called the government of the British people. It's called Her Majesty's government. The opposition to the government, the opposition party to the government, is called Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. They're Her Majesty's courts, Her Majesty's intelligence agencies, Her Majesty's police, Her Majesty's armed forces. I mean, it's in your face where the power ultimately is, but people just ignore it. Oh, doesn't she look lovely? Oh, look, she's wearing green today. If she shapeshifts, no one will see. So it's classic what's happened today. And of course, this week, and Trump came along and said all the usual claptrap and oh God, it's just sickening. And you know, for this to be a celebration or a marking of unbelievable numbers of troops who died, not just in the D-Day landings, but in the wars in general. Did they really die for this crap? Did they really die so that you can't touch a woman because she's even lightly on the back? Because she's of a certain genetic bloodline? Did they really die so that Donald Trump could appoint John Bolton as his national security advisor to create more and more wars that you thought you were fighting to stop? God, of all the people who should be marking the sacrifice of those troops, the last people that should be doing it is this mob from both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, you know, the Queen and her predecessors, they don't go and fight wars. If the Nazis had invaded Britain, the plans were all there for the royal family to be shipped out to Canada, along with Winston Churchill. "We will fight them on the beaches," said Churchill. "But I'll be on a beach not far from Toronto." God is God. Anyway, and talking about various subjects that I've started with today. And this whole idea that Western governments are fighting for freedom, we're fighting for justice, we're fighting to spread our values. Trump was talking this week about we must basically have the values, and Britain and America are united by values. Well, they're united at the elite level, but not by values, by the very opposite. And here's a story which has been running in America this week. Congressman defending accused war criminal says his unit killed probably hundreds of civilians in Iraq combat. Well, it's kind of interesting that that never came out at the time, isn't it? Oh no, we're fighting to free the Iraqi people from a monster. Yeah, the same monster that you provided with chemical weapons via Donald Rumsfeld, the defense secretary at the time of 9/11. Anyway, this is a Republican from California called Duncan Hunter. Actually quite appropriate given what follows. He defended a Navy SEAL accused of war crimes in Iraq, and he said his own unit killed probably hundreds of civilians, unintentionally, he says, but if you shoot into a crowd of people in which civilians are, that would challenge unintentionally. During his 2004 tour as a Marine Field Artillery officer in Fallujah, Iraq, in an interview, Hunter explained his support of Navy SEAL Special Operations Chief Edward Gallagher, who has been accused of war crimes and is being considered for pardon by President Trump. Because Trump has values, you see, gets them off the Queen. I was an artillery officer and we fired hundreds of rounds into Fallujah, killing probably hundreds of civilians, if not scores, if not hundreds of civilians, Hunter said. Probably killed women and children, if there were any left in the city when we invaded. So do I get judged now? Well, yes, you bloody well should. Extraordinary. Ordinarily, it's not a crime, the story goes on, to inflict accidental casualties while firing at enemy positions. But if the enemy positions have civilians in possible firing line, well, it's not accidental, is it? If you drop a bomb on an area where civilians are living and they get killed, it's not accidental, is it? Estimates of the number of civilians killed during and after the invasion of Iraq vary widely, but are generally put in the low six figures, which means they're much higher than that. Gallagher faces a premeditated murder charge for the stabbing death in 2017 of a teenage ISIS fighter who was brought in for medical treatment. Gallagher allegedly posed for a picture with the prisoner's body. I frankly don't care if he was killed. I just don't care, Hunter said about the ISIS fighter. He added, even if everything that the prosecutors say is true in this case, then, Eddie Gallagher should be given a break, I think. Last week, Hunter defended Gallagher, who was turned in by members of his unit while speaking at a town hall meeting in California. The congressman, who is facing a trial on federal corruption charges after allegedly misusing over $250,000 of federal campaign funds for personal use, said he's done exactly the same thing as Gallagher, taking photographs of people he presumably captured or killed while at war. Eddie did one bad thing that I'm guilty of too, taking a picture with a body and saying something stupid and then texting that, Hunter said, frankly. He took a picture with the body with his knife out and texted it to some buddies and said, I got this one with a knife. I've taken pictures, Hunter said, just like that, when I was overseas, eliciting groans from the audience. I didn't text them to anybody. Oh, that's all right then. Didn't put them on Facebook or Instagram. Yeah, good on you. But a lot of my peers, a lot of us have done exactly the same thing. And in response to Hunter's comments, a Marine spokesman, Major Brian Block, said in a statement, Marines are required to comply with the law of war during all military operations, however characterized. If mistreatment of the dead were committed intentionally, it would be considered a violation of the law of war. US service members have been charged and punished under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for posing for pictures with human casualties. Generally, the statute of limitations under this law is 5 years. Well, of course, there shouldn't be a statute of limitation for war crimes. There's no statute of limitation for war crimes by Nazis in Germany in the Second World War. Why should there be for American troops today? And this is something that is a great example of the hypocrisy that we're dealing with. Killing people is wrong, but it's okay if you do it because the government says it's okay. And the war is against horrible, monstrous people. But when you, the good guys, act in monstrous ways and kill people just because you want to kill them, not because it's necessary to protect yourself in a combat situation, then that's kind of okay, according to so many people, including Trump, it seems, who's considering a pardon of this guy. If you're going to set yourself up as the moral police force of the human race, then at the least you can be expected to do is act in different ways to the enemy you are condemning. But increasingly, obviously, over a long period of time, never mind increasingly, that is not the case. Because there's one law for the winners and one law for the losers, one law for the powerful and one law for the less powerful. This is why America won't recognize the war crimes court, the global war crimes court, because it's aware that a lot of Americans will be in that court if it acted impartially and treated everyone the same. Instead, the American government pressures the World War Crimes Court, the International Criminal Court, they call it, to target its enemies. So again and again, people that the American government doesn't like end up in the International Criminal Court, while American war criminals do not, nor British war criminals either, like Tony Blair. So the whole system is absolutely rigged. And another thing that needs to be pointed out in this is when you look at the training of the military, especially these elite military groups like the Navy SEALs in America and the Special Air Services and such like in Britain, the training is there to create psychopaths. That's what its goal is. So they'll do whatever is demanded and more when authorities say they should do it or turn a blind eye to it. They are training and forming psychopaths so that psychopaths in government can advance their agenda. Now, where should we go next? Oh yeah, let's go here. US State Department defunds anti-Iran Twitter account after being exposed. Now, of course, I've been pointing out for a long time that the Silicon Valley giants and the American military, and that which controls the American military, which I reveal in a new book, which is I've just finished, coming out in September. The American military, the American government. What I mean is the what they call the deep state level of the American government, and Silicon Valley, they're all one unit. And this is why the censorship is so coordinated that Silicon Valley is involved in, because it's been done on behalf of the military and the deep state and that which controls the deep state, which is not actually in America. Anyway, this is the story. The US has stopped funding for a Twitter account after revelations that it works for the State Department. Sarah Lee Whitson, Middle East and North Africa Director of Human Rights Watch, initially exposed the account's origin on Twitter this week. This is a US State Department funded account, she wrote. Iran Disinfo was apparently tasked with attacking critics of US President Donald Trump's anti-Iran policies, including withdrawal from the international nuclear deal, reintroduction of illegal sanctions, and stepping up threats against Tehran. The account targeted a Human Rights Watch researcher in search of the impacts of US sanctions on Iranian patients and their access to medicine. They're creating their own echo chamber, and it appears that they're funding it, Ryan Costello, policy director of the National Iranian American Council, told the Middle East Eye, as cited in a report. It strikes me as authoritarian that you would have funding that's being used either by intention or manipulated by intention to go after domestic opponents of the Trump administration. It's not something that's democratic or fair and balanced. Well, of course, America's not democratic or fair or balanced. Neither is Britain. It's all a con. A US official also acknowledged that the account recently deviated from its official purpose by allegedly debunking disinformation about Iran. So this story is simply one of these tips of the iceberg. The most effective of these government-funded and directed networks of disinformation and trolling on the internet is Israel. It's phenomenal, the organization and the scale of Israeli trolls, paid trolls, orchestrated by the military, the Israeli Defense Forces, Mossad, etc., to attack people on the internet who are saying anything about Israel other than it is the God's gift to humanity. And of course, other countries will be doing the same. And America is doing the same. So much that you read in terms of replies on Twitter and other internet platforms actually are not spontaneous members of the public giving their opinion that differs from yours. It's systematic paid trolls who are scanning the internet looking for people who say things that their masters don't want people to accept, and they troll them. Do they get stopped by these the internet tyranny in Silicon Valley? Of course not. People exposing them get stopped. And so that's kind of another irony about Trump contemplating giving a pardon to someone. And I mentioned this guy Gallagher in that story, posing, knifing someone who'd come for medical treatment and then posing in a picture with a dead body. But there's far more that Gallagher is accused of than that, like shooting people for fun. So, including civilians. Like I say, you know, they train psychopaths, so they get psychopaths. And those who are demanded in the American military and other militaries, British military and so on, who are demanded to act like psychopaths, but are not actually psychopathic in and of themselves, they're the ones who suffer enormous mental and emotional trauma and psychological problems when they come out of the military. because they're trying to live with actions, and they're trying to live with sights, the actions of others around them, while they are not psychopathic themselves, and thus they have empathy, and that empathy eats away at them in retrospect. And I'm not condemning the military as individuals, because there are psychopathic troops and there are those that have some kind of empathy, sometimes a lot of empathy, who suffer because of it. What I'm highlighting here are the psychopaths and the system that creates them. And let us not for a second be naive enough to think that part of the psychological profiles that they gather on people before putting them into some of these so-called elite military groupings and wider afield in the military are not based on their psychopathic tendencies, because psychopaths is what they want. Another internet story connected to the military: Amazon offered job to Pentagon official involved with $10 billion contract it sought. In a federal lawsuit, the tech giant Oracle has provided new details to support its accusation that Amazon secretly negotiated a job offer with a then Department of Defense official who helped shape the procurement process for a massive federal contract for which Amazon was a key bidder. Amazon Web Services and Microsoft are now the two finalists to win the highly contested $10 billion contract for what is known as the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, or JEDI. The deal, one of the largest federal contracts in US history, would pay one company to provide cloud computing services in support of Defense Department operations around the world. But the contract has been hotly contested since the department began soliciting proposals last year. Two of Amazon's competitors, IBM and Oracle, filed complaints with the government's Accountability Office saying that the winner-take-all process unfairly favored Amazon, which is seen as the industry leader in cloud computing. When its claims were rejected, Oracle sued the government in the US Court of Federal Claims. Since the court battle began in 2018, Oracle has aggressively lodged conflict of interest accusations involving a former Department of Defense official named Diap Ubhi, who left the department in 2017 to take a job at Amazon. In a court motion filed this week, Oracle alleged that while Ubhi worked on the preliminary research for the JEDI program in the late summer and fall of 2017, he was also engaged in secret job negotiation with Amazon for months, complete with salary discussions, offering of signing bonuses, and lucrative stock options. The motion further alleges that Ubhi did not recuse himself from the JEDI program until weeks after verbally accepting a job offer from Amazon, and that he continued to receive information about Amazon's competitors and participate in meetings about technical requirements, despite a government regulation that forbids such conflicts of interest. Amazon and the military are like entwining your fingers. Same with Microsoft, come to that, and these other internet giants. So I've been saying for so long, and it's all now coming to the surface, to the point where some Microsoft and Amazon shareholders, employees, have challenged that closeness. Not that it has any effect, because they just do it anyway. Now, climate change. 10 of 10 coastal Antarctic stations show zero warming over past decades. Failed scientists need to resign. And then the story starts with an update. Another coastal station has been added, so it's 11 stations showing the same thing. Story goes on. Over the past few years, climate alarmists have increasingly been resorting to weather ambulance chasing, which has necessitated the trotting of the globe in search of weather anomalies to be hauled as proof of man-made climate change. But one place they have been avoiding like the plague is Antarctica, as a number of studies have been showing the opposite of what was predicted earlier has been happening down at the South Pole, except for volcanic activity beneath parts of the Antarctic shelf itself. So a volcano goes off, it melts some ice, and it's global warming. Yeah, that's how it works. But everything else, shut it down. We don't want them to know that. Today, we look at 10 Antarctic stations under operation in Antarctica, scattered across the Antarctic coastline, operated by various countries. They are not impacted by volcanic activity. With the 2018 data in, now is a good time to look at the long-term temperature trends of these stations. We do know that Antarctic sea ice extent has seen an impressive upward trend over the past 40 years, and so tells us cooling may be at play. Global cooling? What follows, the article says, is a series of charts, temperature charts, of each of the 10 Antarctic stations unimpacted by volcanic activity. And you can see the story on davidicke.com, if you've not seen it already, by putting in the search engine words 10 of 10 coastal Antarctic stations now show zero warming. And so it goes on, it goes through the stations in some detail with charts for each, and it shows that the opposite of what is claimed is actually happening. The story says towards the end, finally, a fresh comprehensive study also tells us that summertime sea surface temperatures all around the Antarctic coast have been cooling. This is really inconvenient news for the global warming alarmists. Just when they predicted the South Pole would warm and start a dramatic melting, the opposite, in fact, has happened. It's time to dismiss these alarmists as complete failures, the story says. They should be fired permanently and never be allowed to practice science again. Their failed predictions have led the global community on a wild policy goose chase that has cost hundreds of billions of dollars and set back progress in developing countries by many years. This is, again, the difference between looking outside the mainstream media for your information and looking only at the mainstream media. The story of things like global warming is completely and utterly different when you look outside the mainstream everything. And yet here's a group that is an expression of the mainstream everything and has scammed and manipulated the perceptions of the progressive mentality. Extinction Rebellion, this is an organization that shut down a number of London streets, demanding that basically power be centralized and the fine detail of people's lives dictated to save the world from climate change. Extinction Rebellion threatens to use drones to shut down Heathrow Airport for up to 10 days. Extinction Rebellion is considering using drones to shut down London's Heathrow Airport this summer. Spokesman for the group has said the climate change activists plan to use non-violent direct action to close Europe's busiest airport as part of a campaign against plans to build a third runway there. Well, there may be justification to challenge the building of a third runway at Heathrow Airport, but climate change ain't one of them. XR, as it's called, Extinction Rebellion, announced on Thursday that it would carry out a protest on June the 18th to create a pause in recognition of the genocidal impact of high carbon activities such as flying upon the natural world. But of course, where are these people when it comes to 5G, which is cumulatively going to devastate the natural world by scrambling the electromagnetic information basis of the natural world? Oh no, it's carbon dioxide. God, it's pathetic. Here's a guy, a former Greenpeace director, a guy called Patrick Moore, who used to be in the environmental movement, as I was a long time ago with the Green Party, as a national spokesman for the Green Party, and saw through the propaganda. See, there's a difference between caring about the environment in terms of things that are seriously impacting upon the environment and ignoring those things increasingly by jumping on this single issue bandwagon of climate change, which is not caused by humans. Anyway, Patrick Moore, former Greenpeace activist, he don't mince his words. This is the headline: Fascists using children as front. Former Greenpeace activist compares student climate strikes to Hitler Youth. Former Greenpeace activist has sensationally compared student climate change strikes to this is people that kids that walk out and go on strike, don't go to school in protest at climate change. Well, I would think of a long list of reasons why children should rebel against what happens in school. But of course, again, human-caused climate change isn't one of them because it's not happening. But a whole generation of young people and children is being systematically terrified about the end of the world in their lifetime, so that they will react in the desired way, and so many are. Talking to a radio station, Dr. Moore said students are being used by activists who are behind the global climate strikes. Patrick Moore served for 9 years as president of Greenpeace Canada and 7 years as a director of Greenpeace International. Whether it's Hitler Youth or whatever, it is really mainly fascists and communists that use children in this way as a front, he said. They should be condemned outright by everyone in the world. The Hitler Youth was an organization set up by Adolf Hitler in 1933 to indoctrinate young boys with Nazi ideals, including racial purity. Dr. Moore said children are blindly following a climate agenda and aren't being taught logic or scientific methods. Well, no, because if someone says it who you agree with, then it must be true. Someone says something you don't like, and it must by definition not be true. Anyone with any level of, if you like, intellectual maturity says, I'm going to listen to every statement that people make, whoever it is, and I'm going to decide whether I feel that statement is valid or not. And if I'm not sure, and I think I need to know, I'm going to research it to come to my conclusions. So Donald Trump says lots and lots of things I don't agree with. Sometimes he says something I do agree with. Same with, the progressive mentality. Says many things I don't agree with. It says some things I do agree with. So you take the individual statement. You don't take the person and just believe everything they say by default. But that intellectual maturity means individual perceptions. They don't want that. They want collective brackets mob perceptions, where everyone believes the same thing and silences everyone that disagrees. Moore also believes children are being used as an end to justify the means by abusing young minds as they aren't mature enough to be making serious decisions. The former activist said he was particularly concerned about one of the global faces of the climate change strikes, 16-year-old Swedish Greta Thunberg, who has Asperger's. She's a child in Sweden being used mercilessly by her parents and by society to bring about these school strikes for climate change, Dr. Moore said. And I've made this point in these videocasts when, as part of this activist rebellion deal, shutting streets of London, that Greta Thunberg was used as a voice piece for it. She is being, as Moore rightly says, mercilessly exploited. And he goes on, I've seen her giving her statements. It's absolutely clear that other people are writing the words that she is saying. Absolutely, it's so blatant. And she has a mild form of autism, so this is child abuse in the worst way. And it is extraordinary how Greta Thunberg is being exploited by people who claim they have bloody values. Disgusting. And it needs saying, because you're not supposed to say it, apparently. Someone told me. I didn't hear them. Oh, here's another thing. It kind of fits in with what I said earlier, and with the abuse of young people and stuff, manipulation of young people. Send in the army. UK Defence Secretary Penny Mordaunt wants troops on the streets to tackle knife crime by mentoring youths and convincing them to sign up for military college. Now, when it comes to doublethink, that statement seriously challenges the leader of the Scottish Parliament government, who says that she wants Scotland to be an independent country within the European Union. I mean, that's a contradiction in terms that takes some beating. But having troops on the streets, mentoring youths to convince them to sign up for the military in response to knife crime and violence is certainly up there with Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, or even eclipses it. Just look at the story first. Troops could be used to help mentor youngsters to tackle the scourge of rising knife crime in Britain. Penny Mordaunt is holding a cross-government summit to examine how the army can work with communities to stamp out gang culture by taking youngsters off the streets. The Defence Secretary yesterday told a central London conference she wants to do more on social mobility. Now, first of all, she's only just become Defence Secretary. She knows nothing about defence. She's just put in to replace the guy before who knew nothing about defence. And so she's obviously parroting what she's been told the Department of Defence policy is. And because she's clearly not brain of bloody Britain, she's just repeating it, even though it's contradictory on a level that beggars belief. She said, at a time of rising knife crime and prevalent gang culture in some parts of the UK, the army's ethos can make a real difference to young people. It can offer hope. She said options include tasking soldiers with mentoring youngsters or attracting teenagers to military preparation colleges. She added that she was struck by how these colleges had enthused those who other education establishments had failed to inspire. So let's just break this down. The idea is that you take young people engaging in violence illegally, and you encourage them to join the military where they can engage in violence legally. That's what she's saying. So if the government says you can do it, then you can knife people like this bloke Gallagher in America. If you do it where the government doesn't want you to do it, at least officially, but that's a deeper story, then you're a criminal. So you're going to jail for knifing people. You get a medal. And the difference between the two is whether the government says we want you to do this or we don't want you to do this. And somehow taking someone from illegal unofficial violence and introducing them to legal official violence is somehow going to transform their personality. It's just incredible. If you want to stop people being violent, then first of all, you need to understand why they're violent and address that cause, not move their violence from unofficial to official and from illegal to legal. But like I say, Penny Mordaunt has just become Defence Secretary. She knows nothing about it. She's briefed by civil servants who are always there, no matter who comes and goes in official charge of the department. And therefore hasn't got a clue what she's talking about. Now, let's go here. There's a number of stories that I've looked at this week. I compile them during the week so that I can go through the best ones in these subscribers' video casts. I'll just give you one or two headlines before I get to some other stories. A Facebook lawyer has said they're not abusing people's privacy because people have no privacy. At least he's honest. Face recognition to be used in schools. Apps which are called smart sleep apps, which are operating while you're asleep, are gathering data for marketing firms, etc. And know what you're doing in bed, the story says. Yeah, this is just a story from Israel. I mean, I could do loads of stories every week from Israel because the government is just extraordinary there. Far-right Israeli regime made girl with cancer suffer alone. On May 17th, a 5-year-old child died from cancer in a hospital in Gaza. She died with her family around her, but she didn't know that. In fact, because by that time she was unconscious. In fact, she had spent most of the past month alone in hospitals in Jerusalem, separated from her parents and other relatives by the Israeli permit system that controls the movement of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. Only when treatment failed and she was no longer conscious was she sent back to her family in Gaza. Aisha Lulu, who comes from a refugee camp in Gaza, had been diagnosed with brain cancer in April. She'd been having headaches and vomiting attacks since March, and doctors found a brain tumour on April the 7th. With no specialist doctors in Gaza and in view of her age, Aisha was granted a permit by the Israeli military authorities to allow her to attend a Palestinian hospital in East Jerusalem in the occupied West Bank, but neither of her parents were allowed to accompany her. In fact, not one of her relatives was cleared by the Israeli military to take the child to hospital. It's an hour-and-a-half drive from Gaza to Jerusalem, said her mother, Muna, 27. My heart broke every day my daughter was away. Muna was angry. She was angry at her child's tumour. She was angry that there was she was nowhere near her, that she could be treated. And she was particularly angry at the Israeli military that let I-cke suffer alone. Why does Israel treat us like this? We are not affiliated with any political faction. We are just normal people, she said. And that is a story which epitomizes the mentality, the psychopathic mentality of the far-right regime in Israel. Why does Israel treat you like this? Because the far-right government in Israel is populated and controlled by psychopaths. And whether Netanyahu holds on to become prime minister in these new elections in September, or whether he's replaced by someone else, a psychopath will be in charge, because that's the way Israeli politics has gone. I read a book by a former Mossad agent, which was written in the 1990s, but still very relevant today. And in that, he talks in the 1990s about the only thing you can be sure about in Israeli politics is it moves further and further to the right all the time. Well, that's gone on since the 1990s. And that's why you have the choice between a psychopath and a psychopath now in Israeli elections. Not only now, either. Anyway, face recognition at airports, mind-changing, dangerous drugs given to kids. These are all stories from this week. Oh, let me do this one with statins quickly. And there's a number about vaccines as well, and the dangers of vaccines stories that I've compiled this week. But this is certainly a example of the mentality that's pushing vaccines, the big pharma psychopathic mentality. Shocking new drug danger discovered. Statins found to cause ALS, A-L-S, a nervous system disorder which is fatal. Many people take statins with the aim of improving their health. Well, if they don't do any research, they do. But these drugs come with so many side effects that they're often not worth taking. Long are under fire for their lack of results and their role in raising the risk of diabetes. Yet another reason has emerged for avoiding these drugs. They cause the deadly disorder ALS. It stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and it's a nervous system disorder that causes progressive muscle strength loss that is irreversible. It's also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It causes nervous cells within the spinal cord and brain that control your voluntary muscles to die. So, keep taking statins because it's good for your health. And some of us have been pointing out the dangers of statins from day one. That they came out, but people believe it. See, more and more people don't, but lots of people still believe it. Well, you know, they wouldn't give you something they knew were going to harm you, would they? No, bless him. No, of course they wouldn't. No, nothing to do with money. It's nothing to do with a wider agenda, or even beyond money. No, of course not. Drag artists to read to children as library aims to teach youngsters about gender identity at storytime sessions. Indoctrinate youngsters about gender identity at storytime lessons would be a more accurate headline, really. A library has split opinion by using a session to teach primary pupils about modern views on gender identity. 2 drag artists hosted readings yesterday designed to show children as young as 5 it's okay to be different. You see. There you go. Orwellian inversion. It's not okay to be different, kids. That's why you have censorship. That's why you have abuse if you say things that the official narrative doesn't want people to hear. It's not okay to be different. It's okay to be the same as everyone else in a hoax, a perceptual hoax called diversity, whose aim, first, second, and last, is to destroy diversity. So if you conform, it's okay to be different, so long as your different conforms. If you don't conform, it's not okay to be different. Here endeth the first lesson. 2 LGBT stories, including one called When Carla Was Kyle, or When Kyla Was Kyle, were read to the pupils at the library in Southend-on-Sea. There was also an opportunity to dress up and play games at the family event. See, this is not protecting transgender people from discrimination. This is seeking to create more transgender people via indoctrination and programming of the young. Transgender row erupts as council rules anyone who identifies as female can swim in Hampstead Heath's women-only pond, despite thousands of objections. Doesn't matter. Make it millions of objections. It will still be pushed along because it's the agenda. People want to make a statement. It has to be more than objecting. Just stop cooperating. Boycott the pool. Boycott the pond. Don't go there anymore. Transgender bathers have today been given full access to the use of Hampstead Heath's iconic ladies' pond following a controversial consultation. These are not consultations, they're rubber stamping an agenda. The City of London Corporation, which is based in the City of London, of course, has officially adopted, when I say the City of London, I mean the financial district, which is called the City of London, the city, as opposed to the great urban sprawl of London, has officially adopted a new gender identity policy, which means anyone can access the female facilities if they identify as a woman. But the plans for one of the country's most iconic outdoor ladies-only swimming ponds have been met by a backlash from some campaigners. Others have questioned why the council gave the motion a green light, despite disregarding nearly 19,000 responses to its equality survey. There are already men-only and mixed swimming lakes in the area. Well, if you have mixed swimming lakes, then let transgender people who are in the other body to which they identify swim to their heart's content in mixed swimming lakes. Then everyone's a winner. But no, the agenda wants more. The survey undertaken by the City Corporation shows around 12,390 of the remaining 21,000 respondents agree that trans people should be able to access services relating to their gender identity. In total, around 18,459 votes were thrown out. 12,000 were in favour of transgender users and 8,000 were against. So what did the 18,459 votes say they wanted? Can we know? No. God. And again, we have the apology disease. When you have an opinion which is not what it should be, according to the system, you get kickback from it and you apologize. This is the process, this is the sequence that we're seeing all the time. And here's another one. Imperial College professor issues grovelling apology for promoting articles questioning transgender lobby. A vice provost of Imperial College London was left issuing a grovelling apology for sharing articles which question the transgender lobby on social media. The professor, Imperial's vice provost of education, apologised for causing hurt or anxiety. What about hurt or anxiety of people in male bodies swimming in a ostensibly women-only pond? What about the hurt or anxiety of people in male bodies who say they identify as women, using women's toilets and the toilets of young children. No, no. Oh, no. You're only hurt or anxious if someone's posing the agenda. So students noticed she was sharing articles and liking pages on Twitter that were said to be transphobic. So what we're seeing, you see, is great chunks of young generations now are being programmed from the earliest ages, and certainly through the school and college system, university system, to be the censorious mob on behalf of the system that most of them will claim they oppose. That's the power of programming. More than 80 students signed a letter urging her and the college to publicly respond to their concerns. The professor then vowed to stop all engagement with the accounts the students took issue with, and issued a grovelling apology, the story says. Never apologise for your opinions. Welcome them being challenged, welcome them being debated, because if your opinions have any validity, they will stand up to scrutiny. If they don't, they won't, and that's called public discourse, and so on. So that's it for this week. And like I say, it's been a very interesting week. We'll see where it goes from here. But the interest in Renegade has been tremendous so far, and the more people that watch it and see how it exposes so much in a feature film format, more and more people, I'm sure, will be advising other people to, hey, watch this. I know you won't read one of his books because you won't give it that. You won't go to one of his talks, you won't give it that. But it is an hour and 40 minutes, just a movie. See what you think, and it will have a tremendous impact on those people. Not because it's me, because of the information and how much sense it makes to people once they give themselves the opportunity to hear it. So we'll see how it goes in the next week. It's been great for the first, 2-3 days. And I'll talk to you next week and see what's been happening then. All the best. See you soon. Bye.